Hellraiser is one of the most famous and popular horror movies ever made, and yet several of its unique psychological themes have remained almost universally hidden. It tends to be viewed as a sort of artistic gore fest, but in my view the movie is as conceptually rich and intelligent as The Exorcist, The Shining and The Thing. That's right, I consider it to be as well thought out as those films and, to be frank, more daring in its psychological themes. Gory to some, genius to others. So this video will explore one of those themes, and I'll roughly refer to it as sensory perceptual doorways in relation to the puzzle box. At the plot level, the ornate puzzle box is merely a physical device that spiritually curious characters use to unlock a dimensional doorway to hell. Through that gateway, the Cenobites appear and claim the soul of whoever unlocked the box, and then they subject that soul to levels of physical pain beyond our earthly imaginations. But the concept of the box as a perceptual doorway isn't limited to this ornate prop. A very basic clue is that when Frank first solves the box, he does so while already sitting within a box of lit candles. And these kinds of perceptual doorways related to the box are present on many other levels, some of them quite surprising, philosophical and even deeply metaphysical. So make sure to watch all of this video because the concepts we'll be exploring will fundamentally expand your experience of this awesome film. I think I can pretty much guarantee that. If you're looking for some sort of admission from Clive Barker, who wrote and directed the film, then I'll refer you to this little section of text which is from his source novella, which the film is based on, of course. The young girl character, Kirsty, she's made the keeper of the box at the end of the story, and she considers the possibility of similar boxes in other contexts. Quote, she turned it over in her hand. For the frailest of moments she seemed to see ghosts in the lacquer, Julia's face and that of Frank. She turned it over again, looking to see if Rory was here, but no. And by the way, Rory was the father. That's in the movie he's called Larry, that's her father. Wherever he was, it wasn't here. There were other puzzles perhaps that if solved gave access to the place where he lodged. A crossword maybe, whose solution would lift the latch of the Paradise Garden, or a jigsaw in the completion of which lay access to Wonderland. She would wait and watched, as she had always watched and waited, hoping that such a puzzle would one day come to her. End quote. Of course, crosswords and jigsaws, which are both puzzle references there, those are box-shaped too. Regarding Frank being seen within a square of lit candles, the novella explains that souls captured by the Cenobites are kept in box-shaped cages. We don't get to see these in the film, but they do manifest in a pet store scene as a screaming monkey trapped in a cage, birds trapped in cages, and culturally we often view birds as symbols of the soul, and there's a snake trapped in a glass box with a curious young boy tapping on it, just as Frank was curiously toying with the puzzle box. And I wonder if the specific colours and patterns on the puzzle box are intended to be reminiscent of the scale patterns seen on some deadly snakes. I mean, the box's colours are near identical to those of this particular snake in the film. And when Frank solves the box, it lashes out like a snake, sinking its hooks into his flesh. So I think the snake here represents a variation on the box itself, another doorway to physical pain, as well as perhaps representing snake-like Frank, a tormentor of other human beings who himself becomes a captive of the Cenobites. By the way, after Kirsty encounters skinless Frank and escapes from him, she runs away and the environment fits with this theme, an unpleasant and repeating series of dirty doors and brick walls, like the tunnel that she will be chased down later, and she's then seen against the cage metaphor of a long wire mesh fence. Also in the pet store scene there are crickets trapped in a glass box which are eaten by the homeless guy, and he later turns out to be a powerful demonic force, and so he is like the Cenobites who devour the souls of humans. So yeah, I think the whole pet store setting represents the Cenobites' lair of caged souls. And an amusing little parallel here between Kirsty herself and the trapped animals is that when her love interest Steve surprises her with a touch on the shoulder, her scream is heard as a monkey scream.
Hi.
Hi.
And for the briefest moment of his appearance, his black top even gives him the appearance of being a Cenobite. This in turn leads to another perceptual doorway element of the film, which is also cross-symbolised with the puzzle box prop. Steve is Kirsty's love interest in the story, and the term love interest is amusing because almost universally in life and in fiction, our love interests can equally be called sex interests. Kirsty is a young character, and her childlike innocence in sexual matters, and possibly even her continuing virginity, that's never made clear in the film, these are referred to in Frank's dialogue.
Kirsty, it's Frank. It's Uncle Frank. You remember? No! Come to Daddy. Bet you make your daddy so proud, don't you, beautiful?
Being that Steve is Kirsty's love interest, he in turn doubles up as a sexual threat, a potential doorway to the physical pain of first-time intercourse. Or even if she isn't a virgin, she doesn't know what he's going to really act like in bed. Some people, you get them into bed and they turn out to be really aggressive and more aggressive than you would want them to be. But like Frank with the puzzle box, Kirsty is curious about the sensory possibilities he represents. And a clever little representation of the pain and pleasure duality that a sexual encounter with Steve might bring to Kirsty is that while flirting with her at the dinner table, Steve gobbles his lit cigarette, potentially burning his mouth, and then places it back out of his mouth. There's a little bit of Frank Cotton's masochism in this guy, it seems. And then the notion of a first-time lover going further sensually than has been requested is communicated through him pouring her a drink.
Thanks. Okay. Okay, stop. I'm not going to be able to stand up.
So lie down.
Taking things further than she wanted to go. And as for the ritualistic use of candles framing this scene, that's just a coincidence, right? It can't possibly be related to Frank solving the box within candles, or Larry's dead body framed by candles. No, this is just a normal, nicey nice family dinner with no psychological undertones, right? Wrong! Straight after this dinner, Kirsty leaves the house with Steve. The scene starts with the most penetrating Freudian metaphor, a moving train. A creepy masked face is shown right behind the pair of them in this alley, foreshadowing Kirsty being chased later down a tunnel by the very phallic-shaped shark-toothed monster, itself like an unstoppable train. Only here, that threatening face has very human eyes. Then when she kisses Steve in a subway tunnel, the sexual element is heard as passing trains. And those tiled wall patterns here, those are present when she encounters the phallus monster. Like Frank with the box, she wants to experience the unknown physical pleasures of Steve, but risks a painful encounter in doing so. A hilarious metaphor that one of my subscribers pointed out to me regarding Steve in relation to the puzzle box is that at the end of the film, when the Cenobites have been defeated and sent back to hell, Steve takes his jacket off to warm Kirsty with it. And what's he wearing? A shirt with a Rubik's Cube pattern. Ha! You know those famous puzzle boxes we've all played with that are about the same size as the puzzle box in the film? Yeah, Steve is a walking puzzle box, a Rubik's Cube. Big thanks to John for that observation. And I'll add a little thought of my own on that. Beneath that puzzle design layer of clothing, new sensory experiences are waiting for Kirsty in the form of naked Steve. Another type of perceptual doorway box that is used extensively in the film is the attic room itself, where most of the film's horrors take place. After Frank opens the box and is taken, we see only the beginning of him being torn apart, but when the event is over we see the doorway to the room from outside, and it opens magically, letting us take a peek at the horror within. It's like the box of the room itself has just opened for us to glimpse inside. I won't show the gory scenes within because this is most likely going to be a YouTube video, and so I want to minimise the gore as much as I can. If you've seen the movie, you know how visceral the following scene is. And there's other scenes where the door to this box room of horror swings open or closed on its own. Just as there are scenes where the box decides of its own accord to open or close its doorway between dimensions. This attic room, by the way, wasn't part of the original house location, it was a studio set. And so all that dirty black and brown coloration, the same colour palette as the puzzle box almost, along with the exposed bits of brickwork and what appears on the door to be either black mould or scars from a small fire, all these details are by Gothic conscious design. In the novel, Frank can see into this room from the Cenobite's dimension, and he can be heard scratching on the walls because he's trapped within them, just as he is trapped within the puzzle box. So we could think of this room as an inverse puzzle box. And as was noted in an earlier quote I gave from the novel, Kirsty sees the souls of Frank and Julia in the etchings of the puzzle box. And in the movie, Frank is reborn out of the floorboards of this room. Perhaps the strongest indication of this room as a parallel with the box is a moment in the novel, which was no doubt too awkward and expensive to depict in the movie when it was made. and that is that one of the walls of the room turns into a complex surface of puzzle pieces that move. Quote, the wall was alight, or rather something behind it burned with a cold luminescence that made the solid brick seem insubstantial stuff. More, the wall seemed to be coming apart, segments of it shifting and dislocating like a magician's prop, oiled panels giving onto hidden boxes whose sides in turn collapsed to reveal some further hiding place. She watched fixedly, not daring to even blink for fear she missed some detail of this extraordinary sleight of hand, while pieces of the world came apart in front of her eyes. End quote. Yeah, that would be very difficult to show in a 1987 movie when there was no CGI graphics option. Note that within that description was included the notion of boxes within boxes. This also was present in the film on many levels. The attic room is a box within a house that is less obviously box-shaped on account of the roof. It might seem like I'm arbitrarily making that up, but consider these details. The house itself has a gothic decayed look and contains a history of dark events that have occurred for this family. Like the attic room door, the downstairs doors of the house have moments where they open or close via their own magical force. Yeah, the house as a box, as a perceptual gateway, in this case related to the family itself. At the beginning of the story, when Julia and Larry return to the house and are introduced to us, Larry is struggling to find the right key to the door, just as Frank was trying to open the puzzle box.
Okay.
Well, maybe somebody changed the lock.
Well, like who? Who's going to change this lock?
Eventually Larry gets it open and he speaks a word that is associated to magic.
Yes. Voila.
Voila is a variant of voila, and yes, that's a word often associated with the performance of magic. And when Kirsty and Steve are trying to escape the house at the end of the film, her fight to close the puzzle box dimension gateway occurs right by the doorway to the house itself, with a Cenobite appearing in that dimensional doorway. Isn't it one hell of a fluke that in solving the key puzzle of the door, Larry and Julia are seen through a box-shaped window, itself divided into smaller boxes? Boxes within boxes, just like the actual puzzle box within the attic, within the box of the house. And in one brief shot we get to see a puzzle box-like design on the entrance floor. Boxes within boxes again. If you think the pane glass designs on these windows don't mean a damn thing, then take note of the roses within those designs. Blooming flower symbols are frequent in this movie as a metaphor of blooming sensory awareness of new pain and pleasure possibilities. There are stained glass roses in most of the windows of the house, some are budding roses and some have already bloomed, so they may as well be animated blooming flowers. A religious statue is shown against the windows on the stairs, with the figure being the same height as the flower stem. The statue actually overlaps one of these flowers, with the rose itself being right behind the statue's head. Along with the ethereal light, this image lends a transcendental mysticism to the blooming roses. This image is first shown right after Frank opens the box to hell at the start of the movie and is physically torn apart. His perception of pain and pleasure has just bloomed. That same metaphor of exploding sensory awareness as a bloom of red occurs in a much more violent form at the end of the movie, when Frank, wearing Larry's skin, has his head exploded by the Cenobites. I'm not going to show that clip here though, because I want to avoid YouTube flagging the video for gore. Straight after Frank is taken at the start of the film, we're introduced to Julia and her husband Larry. They, having not been exposed to the pain-pleasure oblivion of the Cenobites, are shown along with two stained glass windows of roses that are yet to bloom. These blooming rose symbols continue throughout the story in various forms of presentation. Kirsty, a young woman who likely has limited sexual experience, or perhaps even no sexual experience, will find herself exposed to the physical extremes of pain and pleasure through her encounters with skinless Frank and then with the Cenobites. As her perception blooms after her first trauma of Frank trying to rape her, she sees his red skinless face, cross-symbolised, with a blooming flower. Her perception of pain and sexuality has started to blossom, and there's no going back. Her experience of opening the puzzle box is quite different to Frank's in that he solves it himself, while she only partially solves it before it transforms on its own, but both of the box opening moments involve a blooming flower metaphor that's easy to miss. The box is temporarily transformed into petal shapes surrounding a disc in the centre, like a metallic flower. In Frank's instance, straight after the box blooms, the four spiked shapes in the centre transform into chained hooks that tear into him, like he's just been caught by the thorns or prickles that are found on the stem of a rose. So yeah, blooming roses with thorns on the stem are used in this film to represent how new possibilities of pleasure bring with them new possibilities of pain. As Frank says, pain and pleasure indivisible. Right, before we move on to the final part of this study, and which for me is the best part of this analysis, if you want to know a lot more about Hellraiser, then I have 2 long-form studies of the film available as digital downloads on my website, collativelearning.com. The first study is called Hell or Nothing. That's a 53-minute video exploring the religious nihilism themes of the movie. And the second is a 54-minute video called The Haunted Biology of Hellraiser. Both of these dig deep into the movie's psychology. Okay, so to end this video, we're going to explore the marvellous box symbolism of the hospital scene, which takes the film into new conceptual territory. But before we do that, I want to mention some related set designs on one other scene. You know how at the start of the film Frank obtained the puzzle box by purchasing it in China, a culture which historically has produced both real puzzle boxes and some of the most horrific forms of torture? Well, midway through the movie, Kirsty and her father Larry are seen eating in a Chinese restaurant of all places. And right above their table on the wall, and not above anyone else's tables, are 2 big ornate red boxes, as well as threatening dragon props on the table in each of their close-ups. Kirsty and Larry's partaking of a bit of Chinese culture here, I believe, is part of a theme throughout the movie that, like Frank Cotton, we all have a certain curiosity about the potential extremes of pain and pleasure. In fact, we're typically drawn to it, and a great metaphor of this is that when Frank buys the puzzle box, the seller is dropping cubes of sugar into his drink. Sugar is a great example of how the initial rush of pleasure in a given experience brings with it the potential for pain later on. We love the taste of sugar, but it has terrible effects on our physical health, especially if overindulged. So in this scene, Frank is like a fly habitually drawn to the puzzle box sugar cube. Like refined sugar, pornography and horror fiction, which are 2 massive industries, these are testaments to the sensory hedonism of modern society. As individuals and as a civilization, we have, through stimulus media, created an alternative reality of ever-escalating intensity, one in which we can safely explore the most extreme possibilities of pain and pleasure. Well, actually, when I say safely explore, I refer to physical safety only, because psychological damage can be caused to viewers if they see forms of extremity on screen that they aren't emotionally equipped to deal with. Makers of pornography and horror fiction, in response to demands for something a little more intense than what's already out there, tend to incrementally push the boundaries of extremity. Our own television sets become portals to simulated experiences of pain and pleasure, of heaven and hell, just as the puzzle box is for Frank in Hellraiser. Both of these boxes offer an alternative to the boredom and perceived limitations of our daily reality. This could be the reason why the black screen titles of Hellraiser zoom out from the box, as if we were in the box to begin with. Could it be that we are playing with a puzzle box ourselves by choosing to watch the film on another type of dimensional puzzle box, a television screen? There are several details that strongly support this notion, and most of them occur in the hospital scene. At many points in the film, the box gives off sparks of light when touched by human hands. As I've outlined in another video on Hellraiser, I think these sparks relate to the neurological electrical impulses that are the basis of physical pain and pleasure. In the hospital scene, however, these sparks take on additional meaning. First of all, think about the context of the scene. The hospital room and the interaction Kirsty has with the staff has a staged appearance to it, deliberately staged appearance. A very large room for a single patient, tiled walls much like the tube station setting earlier, a nurse who sits watching TV waiting for Kirsty to wake up instead of attending to other patients. The room is too moodily lit as well for it to be a real hospital setting. And a doctor who refuses to let her make a phone call and who keeps the puzzle box in his coat and questions her about it instead of letting the police interview Kirsty about why she collapsed in the street and why she had blood on her hair and whose blood it was. And then he locks her in the room as if it's a prison cell. You don't do that to people in hospital. The doctor is implied to be a sort of agent of the Cenobites, who themselves are basically sadistic surgeons. But for our study here, the most important element of the scene is the presence of the television set. The scene begins with skinless Frank's face transforming into a blooming rose, which then transforms into Kirsty herself. She is about to have a blooming sensory awareness when she starts playing with the puzzle box. She sits up and sees the nurse watching TV. On that TV, a rose is blooming, a metaphor of expanded awareness of sensory possibility, fitting with the nurse's opening line.
You're awake.
So this doctor leaves her locked in a room with the puzzle box, obviously wanting her to unlock it. As she picks her up, the shot cuts to the TV, still showing the blooming flower, but this time it includes a brief flash of static. An electrical chaos signal. Kirsty plays with the box in a manner that is very suggestive of sexual curiosity. Certain activities with the finger there. And instantly the previously pleasant pink electrical impulses, these change to harsh blue electrical sparks. She's gone from pleasure to pain. She's gone too far. The box then transforms itself into a flower petal shape, fitting with her now blooming pain and pleasure awareness, and the perceptual door to the Cenobite's dimension of pain emerges. She's then chased by the sexual pain threat of this phallic-shaped creature. It was sexual pain that she feared. As she tries to unsolve the box, in other words undo her own blooming awareness of pain and pleasure possibilities, it crackles with electricity in parallel with the TV screen's flickering static display. Two boxes crackling with painful electricity. A view of the wall turns to negative, in other words to pain, as an unpleasant hiss is heard. It sounds like static or a dangerously hot radiator. Then the TV gives a metaphor of what Frank called pain and pleasure indivisible. The beauty of the blooming rose is mixed with the harshness of static. This in turn cuts to another type of blooming red flower, blood flowing up into the drip bag. Then the flowers on the TV have turned static white in their petals, and the drip bag bursts into a further blooming pain awareness metaphor. Then the light bulb explodes as an electrical or neurological impulse representation of pain awareness. And finally the Cenobites appear, zapped into existence by lightning or by electrical sparks. It's like they've just emerged from the TV set, flooding the room with the harsh light and chaotic wind of the pain symbolising television static, like the TV static is their dimension. They have their conversation with Kirsty, agreeing to let her go if she can lead them to Frank, who had previously escaped them, and when Pinhead threatens to tear Kirsty's soul apart if she betrays them, the shop fills up with even more harsh static light.
We'll tear your soul apart.
Now all of these details in this scene, they look and sound really cool on a base sensory casual viewing level. But if you happen to notice the parallel between the puzzle box and the television set being mutual portals to dimensions of extreme pain and pleasure possibility, then the film becomes very much about the viewer of the film. The idea that the Cenobites might come out of the TV itself as we're watching it, that's a great concept, and that's way before the Ring movie was made. If they did this, the Cenobites would certainly be breaking the physical safety boundaries of television viewing that I mentioned earlier. But for me, I take the puzzle box television parallel as Clive Barker making a basic point that as consumers of sensory extreme media such as pornography and horror films, we, like Frank Cotton, have an inbuilt curiosity about the extreme potentials of pain and pleasure that might be possible in our world. And even though we might not want to actually experience them for real, we often want to experience them in simulated form via a movie, or even a documentary. To that effect, HELLRAISER both delivers and makes comment upon our desire to explore the realms of extremity through the box portals that we call cinema and television. The internet and mobile phone screens weren't an option for the public when HELLRAISER was released in 1987, but the concept equally applies to those as well. In fact, it's not just the genres of pornography and horror films that reveal our own fascination with the extreme. At one point in the film, Larry and Julia are shown watching TV, and what's on the box? Boxing. A sport in which we get to watch two fighters step into a box-shaped arena and inflict violence upon each other. I guess you could say that the puzzle box exists within us all. It's the locked area of our psyche where we hide our extreme pleasure fantasies from others and where we repress our most extreme physical pain fears that we don't want to be aware of. It's a box we forever struggle with because we want to access its pleasures but avoid its pains. So there you go. HELLRAISER is way deeper than it's been given credit, and this video only explores a small amount of the hidden themes in it. There's a good 6 or 7 other themes that I've made notes on, so if you want more, then subscribe if you haven't already, because I'm planning on more HELLRAISER at some point. And don't forget to check out those other long-form HELLRAISER studies that are also available on my site, along with my studies on Poltergeist, Nightmare on Elm Street, The Thing, The Shining, Alien, and many other classics, horror and non-horror. You've been listening to Rob Ager. Stay free.
The video. You clicked on it. We came.